Welcome to Refirement Life, the podcast for anyone navigating life transitions or planning to make life transitions to ensure your next years are your best years. Listen in for insightful, generous, and sometimes humorous conversation. It's time to get fired up with Christine Zamuda and Muge Wood, your hosts for this latest episode of Refirement Life.
Welcome to a special episode of Refirement Life. From time to time, we bring on leaders in industry, and this is going to be a very thought-provoking discussion. We are talking with Linda Zecher and Kathryn Mihalich. And let's get started just introducing these folks and giving you a little context. First, Linda Zecher is a American executive cybersecurity expert who serves as a partner at Cyber Knowledge Partners. Linda has an extensive leadership background, including serving as president and CEO of and chairman of IronNet, a cybersecurity firm, and previously as president of Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. Linda also has had several senior leadership roles at Microsoft, which is where I met Linda, and Oracle, PeopleSoft, and Bank of America earlier in her career. She holds a Bachelor of Science from Ohio State University and has served on multiple corporate and non-for-profit boards. We're excited to have Linda here. Linda's also joined by Kathryn Mihalich. Kathryn is also a partner at Cyber Knowledge Partners, and there she focuses on helping organizations and boards understand and govern cybersecurity risk in the context of business strategy. She holds a Master of Science in Information Science, bringing her real-world experience as a business strategist and advisor all along the areas of cybersecurity governance and risk management. She has served as an external advisor in cybersecurity-related topics, contributing to thought leadership on cyber risk and AI security topics. Joining us also on the panel is my co-founder, Ganesh Shenbagaraman. And Ganesh also has a deep history in tech. He is a seasoned go-to-market leader, over 25 years of experience driving growth for high-velocity software as a service organizations. He's helped lots of companies through periods of hyper growth and profitable exits. He's leaning in with me as a co-founder of Magnet Labs, and it's great to have him join this conversation. Now, we're going to get to the meat of this. Wow. So Linda and Kathryn have written this amazing book, which is just mind-blowing. The book is called Stolen Trust. And Stolen Trust is a techno thriller that imagines a near future world where artificial intelligence becomes so advanced that it can engineer and exploit trust itself. So rather than simply replacing humans, AI in this story mimics people so perfectly that the line between authentic and synthetic connections blur. This is quite something. It's mind-blowing. We're going to go into first welcoming our guest, and maybe we start with Linda, like why this book, why now? And if you can maybe set the table a little bit for our listeners and give us more of an understanding of a bit about the book, so the conversation will be well understood as we get through the questions.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having us on your podcast. Really appreciate it very much. And Kathryn and I are always excited to talk about our book and what we're doing. And I know you all are doing some exciting things too. I think the real reason that we wrote the book is that we've been involved with a lot of corporations, boards, et cetera, and we've been very involved in what's happening in the world of cybersecurity and now with AI. And everyone is talking about AI, and everyone thinks that AI is going to be, it's the next wave of technology, which we all know it is. But what are the ramifications of that? And so there's a lot of discussion, both at the government level and then even at the corporate level, about what is AI going to do and what are the long-term implications. I mean, you had Elon Musk talking about how it's going to replace everyone and we can all sit at home and, knit or something. And so it was interesting for us to think about what could happen and what is happening. And so the book is sort of a reflection of the everyday things you don't think about that are happening today, like some of the cybersecurity things that are happening and how AI is kind of involved in your day-to-day life. You don't really think about that, to what could happen and what we believe is happening and where the future is going. And so it was sort of a thought of how do we really communicate this? And the best way of doing that, we thought, was through fiction, fictionalizing the reality of what's happening. And so, of course, we are two women, so we thought we would have two female reporters that tell the story. And it's the beginning of a series, and we are very excited to have written it. It was a lot of fun, and we think it's very thought-provoking.
Yeah. Right. Kathryn, do you want to comment on the experience?
Yeah, no, this is something completely new for me. I think also for Linda, we've written papers and presentations, but never a book, and never thinking about how do you communicate what's happening in a way. And that's why the fiction was so important to us, is so that it's not a textbook. It doesn't just tell you, and we've all come from the technology world, right? And so when we talk as technologists. And sometimes people who really need to understand, they don't have that. So telling it through stories, and something that was relatable, we thought was important.
Yeah. Well, and as you got into this, when we were talking about the writing process and the fact that you had scenarios that weren't real yet when you were writing it, and then you got to the point of publishing the book, and oh my Lord, like the things that you had envisioned are actually real. So when you talk about when we think about, I guess, the synthetic connection, we're hearing that people are using AI agents now as their psychologists, their therapists. We're seeing young people get tied up into relationships with AI agents. So the question maybe we can start with is a heavy one. When synthetic connection is easier, cheaper, very accessible, like how do we know when to choose what's real and what might benefit us best?
Well, I think maybe I'll start with, I think what happens is that, do you choose what's easy or do you choose what's more difficult? And so we tend to do both in life, but we don't always think about it. We've been doing what's easy, many times. Like you do what's easy when you are maybe having a social engagement and you do a nicety like, oh, you look great today, or, blah, blah, blah. You don't really mean that. And many times you really don't mean it, but you say it because it's easier and it's synthetic. When it becomes more difficult is when you have a pattern of synthetic that you are developing that is really an unconsciousness. Like you're lonely, for example. And so you start having these kind of fake relationships. We do it, people are doing it in gaming every day. Think about what's happening in the world of gaming. People are kids, adults are sitting in front of a game console and they're living in a non-reality world. And it's not real at all, but some of that is getting into their heads and then it becomes real to them. And it's because they're lonely and it becomes a way of filling those voids. We used to fill those voids in more realistic ways. Now there's a lot of opportunity to fill those voids in a fake world. And so those lines have always been there. I just think they're becoming more blurred, and fake is becoming a function of default in part of our living. And that's when it becomes scary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the loss of choice, which is one thing we tried to drive home in the book. It's all fine, well and good if you want to go and, go to the movies and take those 2 hours to, lose yourself in the story and all the rest of that. But in the end, it's a contrived environment. And having that choice of understanding that is it's a choice, right? And so always being conscious of the choice, we think, is really, really critical in these days of understanding that it's nice to be efficient, but efficiency is not life. It helps, but humans in life are very messy, and it's to create an environment that's contrived, I'll use that word again, is I don't think it's productive in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah. And it can be so deceptive, right? The AI agent is always congratulating you on that fantastic idea you have, right? It's the first sentence that comes back. That's amazing. Where did you come up with that idea before I
Yeah.
give you some more on it?
And it's really interesting because it should be a huge red flag to all of us when we stop exploring, when we start taking that feedback from Claude or Chat GBT or whomever you're using, and you just take that as, okay, perfect, great, rather than really exploring, is there more to this I should be looking at? Because in this world that we're in, we want that instant gratification. And so once we get it, move on. I got it,
Yeah.
move on.
Yeah, yeah. So we were starting to touch upon like what are the warning signs people should look for
Yeah.
in technology, and when do we cross the line between where it's serving us or steering us? That was a big theme in your book.
Yeah.
What sort of came forward as you went deeper into that area?
Well, I think part of it is that, when technology it becomes it takes away vulnerability. It changes how we think. People again are rewarded for efficiency or speed and things like that. And so technology is no longer really just a tool that we're using. It becomes a crutch that allows us to get instant gratification. And so I think that's the what we try to talk about. For example, in the book, you've got relationships, you've got people are in relationships. It's simpler. It's simpler to have a synthetic relationship than it is to deal with the pain, the hurt, the emotional impact. And technology takes away that emotional pain that people don't want to feel. And so you can have a synthetic relationship. You're not going to have this emotional feel. You're not going to have the concern of the breakup or this or that. And so it's interesting how we don't want a world where anything hurts us anymore. I mean, just think about some of the basic things. I mean, I think about kids all the time, and in my background and doing a lot in education. Think about how baseball teams today, you don't have winners and losers. Everyone gets a trophy because everyone wants to get something that makes them feel good. And technology, in some of the things that we have out there, like AI and other things in these synthetic worlds that we're in, they make us feel good. And we like that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's true. And I also think about, we don't hear kids talk about having stress, they have anxiety. And it
That's
just
correct.
seems like,
That's
yeah,
correct.
it's a different
Very
world.
different.
Yeah.
And where do you think that anxiety comes from? You think some of that anxiety is because they have phones that they're on all the time, or they're playing on games all the time, or they have these constant things where they feel like they have to respond to a text, or they have to instantly respond to some comment, or they have to be on social media and instantly respond. That creates anxiety.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And just the instant on and everything needs to be done in the moment is also, I think, a factor that people sometimes don't understand, that stress could be your body just telling you to do something instead of just trying to knock it out, right? And then obviously the anxiety is real too. There's certainly situations where that's more pronounced and it should be cared for, but there's also that missed opportunity of just being in the moment and understanding what to do.
And the technology, rather than being a tool for us, has become the infrastructure that we exist in and not participate in sometimes. And that's, to me, is a big difference. Because when it becomes the not just the what you use to be more communicative with people who you don't see. I love that I get to keep better touch with people that I would not have had in my orbit and to see what they're doing. But I also, that's a tool, but to have that be as my only basis of relationship with them, I don't think it's not human. It doesn't feel the way it in my opinion should. So there's a difference between us using it and us not participating but being used by.
Yeah. So you just touched on friendship. When we think about friends, and we'll put this in quotes, optimized for engagement, or colleagues that are manufactured for compliance, and in your book, even pastors designed to influence the bereaved, like what type of synthetic relationship felt most plausible when you were writing it? Which ones were more disturbing? And how did that sort of reveal itself for you all through that process?
Well, to me, I think it was the pastor. I thought that was the most concerning, that because, when you are bereaved, when you are, something has happened that really upsets you for whatever reason. And when someone takes advantage of that, that is just the lowest thing that can possibly happen. I mean, Kathryn and I have talked a lot about, and in fact, I'll let her tell the story, but people that are lonely and they are suddenly in these relationships with someone that they're doing over text or emails and things like that. They never really meet them, and they end up giving them money, or they give them access to their bank accounts, or whatever the case may be. And that's someone taking advantage of you because you are in an emotional state. And so this is what, in the book, when the pastor is taking advantage of the guy that had just lost his wife, what a horrible thing. But that is how technology is doing it. And now it's happening not just through someone that used to, come to your house and take advantage of you. Now it's happening through these synthetic relationships.
Yeah. The story that Linda's speaking about is, I was at a dinner party, and one of the gals there was talking about she had lost her husband. She's not unsophisticated. She's traveled. Her husband was a big corporate executive, so she had been around for, traveled, been around. And she, over the course of a year, she went on one of these dating sites, which seemed legitimate. I won't name it, but it seemed it wasn't. Let's put it this way: it wasn't Grinder, right? Everybody knows
or Tinder,
but it was one, where they take your profile and they find the right place and person for you, and blah blah blah. So she starts communicating with this gentleman who, over the course of a year, and you wonder how much data he had gathered about her, right? And all the stuff that we talk about in the book, how, they can see when you're happy, see when you're sad, use all these models to see when you're online. So over the course of a year, he'd call her in the morning, in the evening, texting. And by the time it was all said and done, towards the end of the time that she was involved with him, he walked off with $350,000 because he called and said, well, I live in a not so great part of the world, or he was on a traveling, whatever the story was, and he was being held hostage, and by this time, and he knows her patterns. So it's probably not only a bad actor, but it's a bad actor with a lot of data that they can then use to manipulate. So, and she said just, it was embarrassing. She said, but warnings to others.
Yes.
It's easy to get lulled in. Without going down too many metaphors, I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and there's a river called the Monongahela. And the Monongahela is one of the few rivers that flows north. And when you look at that river, it is very calm. You don't see the currents, but you get into that river and it's going to take you a place you don't want to go. And when I see and hear these stories, that's what I think about. It lulls you into this false sense of, oh, this is great. I have a friend, or, I'm learning so much. I have so much data, or whatever the situation is. And the next thing the undertow's pulling you under and you're drowning. So that visual goes through my head quite a bit when we're writing or reading about some of these stories.
Yeah.
I think it's also that, like, to add on to what Kathryn said, digital life, it promises kind of clarity and instant answers.
Mm-hmm.
Analog life, or a reality of everyday life, far more complicated. And it has uncertainties, it has moods, it has, swings for whatever reason. And so people today kind of like that clarity, and they don't want the uncertainty. And that's why they end up in situations where they don't really know the person, but they think they do over a course of a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that same situation happened to a very good friend of my mother's, and it was over months. And at the end of the day, I think took $250,000. They got everything but 80,000 back. They had the FBI involved, and what they learned at the end was the individual was using the Prince of Austria's photo through the whole thing, and it can happen to anybody. She was a smart lady too. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy.
I think the one thing too that, and it's kind of a little bit of a different angle on this, but it's something that I also think about, is we believe that computation is consciousness. And so it's easy for us to blur the line between what's happening in AI and the answers that it's giving us, and that it's some form of human with the context, right? Linda, we talked about this morning,
Right.
all of the context around it and all the rest of that. But consciousness and the piece that makes us human is not computation. You cannot teach AI to be conscious. Now, maybe somewhere down the road with quantum physics or more quantum computing and some other things, we might get closer. But there are things that happen in our brain that will never happen in a machine, no matter how smart you think it is. So I think getting people to think about that it's, AI, we won't need surgeons. Yes, you will, because there might be a time during that surgery when, the surgeon makes a decision that has context and that rich and robustness around it that no AI model could ever have experienced, and you just can't teach everything. So I think, again, using these fictional characters was a way to help people who don't live in this world start thinking about the ramifications and how they can choose to step into that environment or not.
Right. We mentioned this earlier in the conversation, and just loneliness being a challenge, and it makes you more vulnerable in these situations. So what do you believe loneliness and having a lot of it in the world is doing to modern decision making? And how can people build resilience? How can they be more aware of, hey, maybe I'm falling more, maybe I'm more susceptible to this interplay with an AI agent that feels real but really is synthetic? Any words of advice for some of the folks out there?
Well, loneliness is one of the most powerful psychological forces in our being. I mean, it is. And technology doesn't create loneliness, but it instrumentalizes it. And so I think that's a thing that we have to think about, that, it does, technology can offer solutions to loneliness without intimacy. And it can be a constant contact, it can be an instant response, it can be all those things, but it's not giving you that emotional intimacy that real relationships give you. And so I think that we have to think about how do we make sure that people understand that technology is a great tool, but it's not a replacement. It doesn't have memory. It doesn't have, as Kathryn said, it doesn't have consciousness. It doesn't bring all of the feelings and the things that we have as humans. It doesn't bring any of that. And when people stop thinking about things in terms of all of those other factors that create who you are, and they start thinking of themselves through dashboards and through metrics, that's when they kind of lose that connection. And that's when loneliness can become a tool to be manipulated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Let's talk a little bit about some of the characters. Copycat.
Yeah.
So our listeners, I guess, will get deeper on this when they hopefully purchase the book, Stolen Trust. But in this book, Copycat has emotional modeling and emotional metrics. You talked about KPIs and not, being anchored on a dashboard, but when you see that those analytics actually reflect a future of influence that looks very intimate, and going through the process of writing this book, like, what emotions do you think are easiest to hack at scale? There's examples: grief, belonging, fear, hope. What do you think about that? And what's the human defense against hacking those emotions at scale? Synthetic emotions.
Well, I guess I would say that I think fear is probably the greatest emotion that can be hacked at scale. And you're seeing that today in your everyday life. You're seeing that in our politics. You're seeing that in everything. You're seeing that in what's happening around the world. You can see it back in what happened back in World War II during Nazi Germany. Fear was a driver for so much of these things. And today, fear is so much of a driver for everything that's happening and how we react to it. And people, when they tend to fear whatever, whether it's, their former life and the way life used to be versus the way life is, they fear change. They fear new cultures. They fear impacts on their culture. And so all of those things can be manipulated by people that are trying to, get into power or whatever. And fear is a huge driver for people that are trying to harness it for power. And so I think that is the largest and greatest concern. Grief obviously is right up there, and we've talked about grief, but I really do think that fear is probably the most carefully manipulated emotion that we have. I don't know, Kathryn, you and I talked about this. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you on the fear. It can be, we humans live within this environment, this ecosystem, and we're dependent upon one another, and we're dependent upon the environment. And it sounds very lofty and kind of, esoteric or what, but it's not. We have shown up here either by God or nature, choose however we get here. But we are in this this web of existence, and to have that threatened, to me, that's where the fear comes in. Mm-hmm. And as Linda said, it is, to me, the most easy manipulated, because I think it's one of those, it's kind of one of our basic raw emotions, right? Mm-hmm. You can, I think, take off and explain some of those other things in grief. You can equate it back to a certain level of fear. So I agree with Linda. Fear is, to me, it's the one that's most easily manipulated.
Yeah, right. That makes a lot of sense. Especially, I mean, you look at social media and the things that go viral, the violence, right, things that stoke fear. That's very powerful and easy to do at scale.
If it bleeds, it leads, right?
Yes. Yes.
Look how fast fear, though, has changed our culture here in the U.S. Think about mm-hmm. that. I mean, if you go back to, all the way back to like 2004 or even 2001, prior to 9/11, I mean, and fear of everything has just exacerbated itself. And we had a fear of anyone that looks different than us, that anyone that thinks different than us. Religious fear has gone back for, centuries. But it's amazing to me how we keep kind of going back through the same circles. It's just a new group to be afraid of or a new thing to be afraid of. And that's fascinating to me. And technology is allowing that fear to be harnessed and used for power so much faster than ever before.
Yeah. I mean, history is the biggest lesson. And
Yeah,
here
no,
we
absolutely.
are, we reliving everything all over again.
Yeah. Through a new lens.
Exactly. So let's talk a bit about discernment, because that's super important in everything we've just talked about. When the stakes are high, there's a lot of fear. There's the opportunity for technology to create things that are very lifelike, deep fakes, making someone's likeness exactly like them, voice, everything. It's getting very, very hard for the average person to decide what's real and what's not. So as we go back to your book, what does discernment look like when authenticity is very hard or even becomes impossible to verify?
Well, I think discernment is when the truth becomes indiscernible, it from simulation, it stops being about verifying things and it starts becoming around kind of orienting things. And so I think discernment, it no longer can prove, when you no longer can prove what is real, you have a shift. Everything sort of shifts in your underlying beliefs. And I think that shift sort of changes everything. And so, and I think that's happening today. It's going back to what's happening around fear, because you can't discern what's true and what's not true. And so everything underneath you shifts. What do you believe? What do you not believe? And do you start just being in this world of what's real? And that's kind of where we are. I mean, you don't know today if if they're real videos, if they're fake videos. You don't know if they've been manipulated. You don't know what's been edited, what hasn't been. So your ability to have a foundation that you can go back and say, I know this is real, is gone. Mm-hmm. And so that makes it really hard. And so it makes it, in some ways, if you just believe everything that's out there and say, okay, I'm just going to trust this. And then you don't have to have that internal turmoil of what's real and what's not real. And so that's what we, I think, tried to express. And that's kind of what we were trying to say with like Magnet Labs, with you. Like, what does that, what are we talking about here? And what is the big thing that we're trying to express about our book? And what are you guys trying to do with, the stories that you're telling? And so I think that's the kind of the interesting thing about what's real and what's not real.
Yeah. I want to believe that the dogs in the shelter pick the right owner. Have you seen those videos?
Yeah.
And they're like, wow, they're perfectly suited. I found out that those were all AI fakes.
Really?
All AI. Oh. Well, there's one that keeps looping that is definitely an AI fake, and it looked completely real. Like the bulldog picked the right owner, the old lab with the white face picked the old man. It was all, I was just like,
I can usually tell the fake still, but Christine, you just broke my heart on that.
I think there's an extra finger on one of the guys.
Oh,
no.
No.
And once you watch a few, then you keep getting more of them.
Exactly.
Oh, this is so disappointing.
I know. Yeah. Well, it's to the point of like, what's real and what's not. And it's okay. I guess that's, a feel good moment. Just put it in the right place.
I think, again, that goes to the choice, right? You put it in the right place. You go, okay, that was a feel-good moment, and, okay.
Yeah.
But I think choice, and the willingness to know that, and the willingness to accept that life is messy. Mm-hmm. Thinking is messy. It's hard. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's hard. And being, and that the other word that we use a lot, and not a lot, but we use some in the book, is friction.
Mm.
And friction is a good thing. It creates fire, it creates heat, it creates tension. And without that, it may feel good till you're up the river.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, we
You know,
always encourage the clients that we work with to make sure that they're having healthy friction, to your point. Like, when are you disagreeing? And if we're not here, we don't disagree. We're a great team, Margot. They're not healthy enough if you're not disagreeing.
That is correct.
Yeah.
And you also talk something about collective defense. So is that part of the invisible hand that could be on your end, on our side, while we interact with a lot of the synthetic? Is there a collective defense where it's like it's not just us defending ourselves, but there's a group of people?
Oh, that's right. And that's the collective defense is part of being human, right?
Mhm.
It's this ecosystem that we exist in. We like to think we have minion and that we're above everything, right? We don't live in the world. We can, you know, exploit, extract without consequence. That's not the case. So that collective defense is part of that humanity. It's part of that collective. It's part of this ecosystem. Like I said, however we get here from God or from nature, again, pick, we are connected in one way, shape, or form. So I think that collective defense is an important part.
Yeah.
And I think that's that's being the analog. That's kind of the non-technology analog part. I think that's going back to your discernment, question. I think that, because they are this collective defense, because they are human, they are questioning and they are actually doing the work behind to make sure what they get is real. And when we were talking about discernment, I think a good point around that is that today, so many people are using AI, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, to get an answer, but they don't do the work around it to make sure that answer is really everything. And that's where that human component comes in, that you've got history, you've got background, you've got the ability to think. And so you need to make sure that you are going through and looking at information and making sure it's real, rather than you have a discerning mindset. I guess that's what the human component is that we need.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we sort of wind down, one of the most chilling questions in the book was, am I real? Okay. And your book doesn't just ask what is real, it asks whether we are real when memory, reality, and connection are service tiers. So tell me more about that.
Well, I think to me, the realness part was, throughout the book, they are consciously self-aware, and that's realness. And so, how do you know if you are, if you are really real or if this thing is real? It's kind of conscious self-awareness. And the other thing that realness brings is that you have morals and you have imagination and you have creativity. So being able to identify those things is a way of, am I real or am I not? What is real, what's not? And looking for those characteristics that are clearly human characteristics that you might be able to maybe try to show through technology or create in technology, but you don't really ever have them just through a tool. And so that to me was the biggest thing of identifying what was real, what wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned morals, because one thing popped into my head, and this is something that I'm sure many of our listeners who are, tech savvy have heard, but there was some research on, I think it was 5 different AI agents, and then they tested these AI agents at the big companies. So it's, some of the leading players, and they told the AI agent that they were going to be decommissioned. And then one of those AI agents went back through all of the company emails and started blackmailing one of the leaders with by saying they were going to disclose an affair that the person had had. So kind of interesting that was a lack of morals in that situation. But kind of scary. Kind of scary.
Kathryn has, I think maybe Christine has read our second book.
That's good. That's good. A little teaser for the second one that's coming.
Yeah,
Do you have it?
yeah.
Do you have a working title name for it, or too soon?
Yeah, too soon. Yeah.
Okay. We'll just have to watch. We'll just have to watch.
Yeah.
Well, what a delight. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
No, I think choice, empathy, and realizing that that consciousness is not computation.
Mhm.
And these tools are great. They are going to make huge changes. But just because they're great, it's like, it's the old thing is one piece of cake is great, but if you eat the whole cake, maybe not so good, right? And so I think balance is another thing, right? You have to, the correct application and the correct way is the only way that we will get through this and be able to take advantage of all of the good things without being taken down the river and drowned, because we are on that path. And I don't necessarily agree with how some of the technology folks are like, just forge ahead and blah, blah, blah. I think these discussions, and thank you guys very much for having us here and having these discussions and the work you are doing with Magnet Labs, to have people go, this is good, and you have to keep stopping and saying, are we on a good path? Is this still good? Yes. Okay, keep going. But that reflection is needed.
Right. So the book is Stolen Trust. We'll have a link to the Amazon link where you can purchase it. And Linda and Kathryn can be reached at cyberknowledgepartners.com. Thank you so much for spending the time with us. Congratulations on the book. I'm so excited for everyone to read it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. It was a good conversation.
Yeah,
absolutely. Thanks. So with that,
Bye-bye.
We'll sign off. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Our hope is to spark a little joy, inspire, and educate our listeners in ways to live an even more meaningful life. If you have reactions to share from what you've heard, please visit our website, refirement.life, to leave a voice message. You may even be featured in a future episode. To keep in touch, subscribe to our podcast, Refirement Life, using the podcast player of your choice. Always remember, you are never too old to set a new goal or to dream a new dream. Thanks again for joining us on this episode. Until next time.